They don't need to care about the special effects.
Or the dialogue.
Howdy, folks. Have you seen 2018's Truth or Dare? Because I have not. This won't be a comprehensive review of the film by any means, but as always, I will be calling it as I see it. That means we'll be talking about things like storytelling and character development and the reliance on cliches. And if everything goes the way it normally does with these kinds of movies, there will also be sarcasm and laughter. Lots and lots of laughter. Hopefully. According to that sign, the opening scene takes place somewhere in Mexico near the US border. A haggard-looking young lady pulls into a gas station, which is a fantastic place to meet some very interesting people, I might add. On the US side, anyways. I haven't spent a lot of time in Mexico. Now, of course, I wouldn't go as far as to say they'd be so interesting their voices would go all demonic and ask you truth or dare the way this one's just did. And then the haggard girl sets an entire full-sized human gas station window shopper on fire with a tiny little squig of lighter fluid. Which brings us nicely to the opening title card. And then, based on the marketing, etc., I'm assuming we're meeting the main character, Olivia, and she is acting as our true north moral high ground, which is wildly original and very exciting. Olivia's a college student and she has a YouTube channel. She's a devoted, dedicated team leader for the Habitats for Humanity charity, and she is meant to be building houses for them over the spring break. And she seems to be taking it all rather seriously. Till her friend Marky comes in and suggests they go to Mexico instead, and that's the end of the house building plans. I mean, who says young folks nowadays don't understand commitment? And the rest of the cast. Say what you will about Rob Zombie movies. I love some of them. I hate some of them. His actors have interesting faces. They're real people. They look like us. They're ugly like us. Like some of us. There's something about modern casts, and it's not limited to this specific brand of cheap horror film. It's like the Zoolander effect. I mean, look at this. Look, no body fat. 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 Remember this sophisticated formula if you are looking for a quality horror film, my friends. No fat equals fat calf. I'm only kidding, of course. Last thing this channel needs is more messages from angry, triggered supermodels, right? Once they're in Mexico, they just get straight to it. There's the obligatory making out, the obligatory gay character, the obligatory aggressive asshole, and the obligatory nice guy sticking up for moral high ground Olivia being accosted by the aggressive asshole. It is a shitload of tropes, but at least they're being efficient about it by packing it all into the one scene. Having said that, when a movie opens like this, unashamedly following the formula, it just becomes deja vu to me. This is usually where my phone comes out, and I will start watching something else while I'm watching the movie, and 2 hours later, I've absorbed like 20% of 11 different things. So the nice guy's named Carter, and he invites them to an abandoned church to play Truth or Dare. And it's pretty much what you're expecting for the most part, until one of the girls asks Carter Truth or Dare. And when he says truth, he's asked why he brought them all to the abandoned church, which is arguably the lamest question anybody has ever asked playing Truth or Dare, but it does serve the plot, I suppose. Carter is bound by the rules of the game, so he tells them he had to get them playing so he could pass a deadly curse onto them. Apparently the game of Truth or Dare is real, and if you don't play along, you'll die. Just for the record, because I do shit on a lot of these movies, I don't hate this concept. It's a potentially interesting premise. My problem is, 99% of writers end up shitting their pants when it comes to taking the idea of Truth or Dare and turning it into a story. And most people can't do that. But this time, they're probably going to pull it off. Back in America, the writers beat us over the head again with how incredible Olivia is. Firstly, when she lends a shoulder to her friend Brad, who is complaining about his homophobic father. Because it wouldn't be convenient to the story to put Olivia into a nun's habit, they have her hand cash to a homeless man who just happened to be pushing his cart through the heart of her affluent neighborhood, as they always do. Inside the house, the good-looking couple's still hanging off of each other, and Olivia keeps seeing Truth or Dare written everywhere. Fuck off. Livia's best friend, Marky, comes into her room and we are treated to this exceptional and engrossing dialogue,
Since my dad took his life, you've been my only family.
which feels so natural and heartfelt and realistic. Don't you talk to your best friend like that all the time? Remember that time my father hung himself in the garage? That period was particularly challenging for me, and you provided me with an adequate quantity of support, and for that I am very grateful. Back in Ski, Livia is surrounded by a bunch of squishy-faced demons who force her to pick Truth or Dare. Based on the trailer I saw earlier today, I am betting we're going to be taken out of this movie several times by this cheap CGI stuff. If you want to know if an effect is cheap or not, ask yourself the obvious question. Do I think I could figure out how to do that at home? And that brings us to another problem that seems to plague a lot of these modern horror movies. Everybody knows you should use practical effects whenever you can. And all effects, whether they're practical or CGI, should be used to enhance the story, not hang the story from. And back to Olivia, who picks the truth, and that forces her to announce her best friend Marky constantly fools around on her boyfriend, and that causes a big kerfuffle because they both happen to be in the room at the time. Then the aggressive dude from earlier, who I think is named Ronnie, maybe? Well, he gets aggressive again, which of course he does. So one of the squishy-faced demons forces him to play Truth or Dare, and he's interrupted completing the dare part of it, so he dies to death. That effect was not the worst, but the problem is that's the gimmick established, and the premise of the story is built around the gimmick. And unfortunately, like I said right at the start of this review, there won't be any escalating stakes. This is it. I can tell you right now without watching another second of this movie. We're about to see this happen to the rest of the characters one at a time. It's an easy pitfall for horrors to fall into. Take Last Voyage of the Demeter, for instance. Demeter, not Demeter or Demeter. Demeter. You ignorant Only joking, I'm only joking. Or am I? I know a lot of people love that movie, and as a huge Dracula fan myself, I certainly enjoyed certain elements of it. However, if you break the story down into its basic components, the monster killed each of the cast members one at a time. Back to the movie. Right on time, Lucas has to tell the truth, which he seems to do, and does that get him into the next round, or does that end the game for him? You'll probably find out later on, Jonny. That's how stories work, so shut the fuck up. Ooh, then Marky's forced to break Olivia's hand with a hammer. And then the token gay character Brad is dared to tell his police officer father that he's gay. But his dad's good with it, and Brad's happy he did it. And now I'm very confused about the squishy-faced demon's intentions here. Is he a demonic entity, or is he one of the main cast members from the Marvels? And then this character, who's named Tyson, is the one who refuses to believe what all of his friends are telling him about the game being true. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. As a side note, I spent an entire weekend looking for my Razer webcam, and it was sitting on top of my monitor where it's supposed to be the whole fucking time. So he keeps lying when he should have been truthin', and then he dies. And that really breaks my heart because of the bond I'd established with Tyson. This is another thing with these modern horror movies. All of the characters lack depth. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I am aware the supporting cast, especially in a movie like this, are there to be systematically taken out. Who did this better? Look at Jordan Peele's Get Out. Setting aside just for a second the obvious core message about white folks historically using black folks' physical bodies for their own benefits, we were not shown what was actually going on behind the scenes until we 100% understood exactly what made Chris tick. That movie and a lot of movies like it are often labeled elevated horror, and to me, personally, that term is a bunch of bullshit. Every horror movie could become elevated immediately if the writers and the directors decided to take the time to give us a great story with fleshed out characters. That brings us to the 45-minute point, or roughly halfway through the story, and right on time, the main characters make a midpoint shift. If you watch millions and millions of movies like I do, you'll see a lot of them follow a pattern like color by numbers or something. At the midpoint, the main characters tend to transition away from reacting to what's been happening to them. They'll gather information to help them understand exactly what's happening to them. This movie and a lot of modern horrors use the internet. They'll use this information to start proactively tackling what they've been reacting to up until now. During their search for info, they managed to locate video footage of that opening scene in the gas station. You know, that footage from the barren Mexican gas station. It happened to be available online. They also find out the girl who did it is named Giselle, and she's wanted for murder, so of course they message her on Facebook. Now personally, I don't respond to half of my friends' messages on Facebook, never mind messages from a stranger whilst I was on the run for homicide. And then they find Penelope up on the roof, and she's been dared to walk along the edge of the roof while she's drinking a bottle of alcohol. This demonic entity is so lame. I used to do that 3 times a week in my college days, and I didn't need an ancient novelty curse to motivate me. If you pay even a little bit of attention during this scene, you will notice that these 2 characters have been replaced by 2 Snow White stunt doubles. They're not even close. So her friends are walking around underneath with a mattress to save her if she falls, and they do save her when she falls. So because she didn't die, does that mean no? So she completed the task, meaning she gets into the next round again. It's only if... I am confused now. Oh, and then the girl messages them back on Facebook. You know, the one, Giselle, who's currently wanted for murder and doesn't know any of them and is clocking time on social media right now whilst on the lam. So they meet up with her, and she is an extraordinary actress.
And my roommate wanted to play Truth or Dare, so we did.
Maybe I shouldn't say anything. It might not be her fault. Maybe the squishy-faced demon dared her to act with the emotional range of Kristen Stewart. And wow, I'm just realizing that Penelope Girl is the hardest drinker alive. She just necked an entire bottle, passed out, fell off the roof, and now 3 minutes later, she's giving off to that new girl 100% sober, which is irrelevant already because apparently the girl was dared to shoot Olivia, which she did, but Penelope, the hard drinker, jumped in the way and took the bullet. And that's the 3rd time this movie has broken my heart. And that means Murder Girl failed at her dare, so she goes all squishy-faced demon and turns out her own lights. They go back online and find every little detail they need to fill in the rest of the blanks, and to that I say, thank fuck for the internet. I mean, I can't find out what time my grocery store closes on holidays, but these guys, I guess one of them must know how to type things into the Google search bar properly. The homeless guy who Olivia gave the $1 million to earlier somehow breaks into their house, and he dares Olivia to have sex with Lucas, who is her best friend's boyfriend. So right after Marky's heart starts back up again, she leaves, and they do have sex, and right in the middle of the completely overdone scene, Lucas is forced to admit he loves his girlfriend. Squishy Face Demon also does couples counseling. If there was any tension in this movie, there's not. It would have come from this love triangle dynamic, but the demons just cleared that up for them, which is definitely a positive thing, and now I've really got no idea what the fuck this game is actually about. Then Olivia and Marcus just pop down to Tijuana instead of going to see if Marky's okay after her boyfriend and best friend just banged. And while they're gone, Marky's dead dad, Truther, dares her into truthing. And in Tijuana, they speak to an ex-nun from the church they partied in back at the start of the story, and they were able to locate this woman in the middle of fucking nowhere, decades after the original event took place, with the internet. No. My cheeks are sore. I'm better now. It's one thing for a movie to info dump half of its story through dialogue between characters or whatever form of exposition. You see it all the time in really shitty movies. One character will explain everything to another character so we in the audience can understand what was happening because the writers weren't good enough to show us what was happening. It's rarely done properly, and you usually end up feeling like the story is being spelled out for you. But this nun's had her tongue cut out, so she can't speak. So they literally have her spell out the lore of this story with a pen. So she explains to us she summoned a demon named Calyx to save herself from a sadistic priest, and that'll be our squishy face monsters. And in response, the demon kept a game of truth or dare going to kill all of her friends. I think that's a fairly standard response from an evil supernatural entity, isn't it? A game of truth or dare? Some of you may know that I am in the middle of loads of my own research for a documentary I'm making for this channel about black magic and the occult. And if memory serves me correctly, if you evoke the demon Abaddon with an incantation, he is very likely to start up a game of Duck Duck Goose. And if you dare summon the likes of Asmodeus, for example, you may find yourself in a vicious round of musical chairs. Anyways, the 90-year-old silent nun trapped Calix, the demon of Truth or Dare, by cutting off her tongue and sealing it in a pot. And eventually, they all conclude Olivia and Lucas are going to need to locate the person who originally broke the pot and released the demon back in Mexico at that church. And that person is going to need to cut their own tongue out to trap the demon in the pot again. And back in America, whilst Brad is talking to his dad, he's dared to threaten him with his own gun. And when he does that, his dad's partner shoots him in the heart. Could he not have popped him in the leg or the shoulder or tased him or shouted over, "Hey, stop it"? Right after Olivia and Lucas get back, Olivia's dared to tell Marky her father killed himself because he tried getting down with her one day and she rejected him. When he begged her not to tell his daughter, she said he'd probably be better off dead, which... That's just good writing. It's really just good writing. I wonder if there's anything interesting on my phone. Just kidding. Then Olivia busts in on Marky, who's about to turn her own lights out, but Marky gets over it literally immediately, so forget I said that. You see, with a movie like this, like Truth or Dare, if I pay too much attention to it, or like if I see a recognized film critic saying something positive about it, it actually makes me angry. I think it's because it forces me to acknowledge and accept, to a certain extent, movies have turned into this big, cold, dirty, shitty business. But the reality is, and what upsets me, I think, the people that make these don't give a shit what we think. It's not like they're even making movies anymore. They're just taking advantage of our curiosity and our need to escape the daily grind of life an hour or two at a time. They don't need to care about these stories. They don't need to care about the special effects.
But the dialogue. Truth or Dare's budget was $3.5 million, and the movie grossed $95.3 million.
They don't need to do anything more than count their money. Sorry, folks. So they locate Carter with the internet, the nice guy who started all this at the start of the story, and they all head back to Mexico. And they give Carter a knife and something to read 7 times. And while he's reading it, Lucas gets dared to kill either Olivia or Marky. So Lucas wanders off to avoid having to do it, even though that's literally never worked once in this movie. And of course, he goes all squishy-faced next and heads back to take out Carter, but little dainty Marky spear tackles him like Ray fucking Lewis. And then Lucas does Carter in, and then himself, and then Wow. Bear with me a moment. The tongue won't work anymore because Carter had to do the whole thing himself. So Olivia, the Habitats for Humanity team leader who hands money to homeless people and always has enough time for her friends if they're in need, asks all of her YouTube followers Truth or Dare. And that means anybody who watched the video, young or old, healthy, disabled, good or bad people, are in the game until they die. If you're still here, I've kept you long enough. In summary, I think the key to revitalizing modern horror starts with stronger storytelling. Stronger storytelling implies an understanding of characters and character development, along with an ability to use the horror tropes and horror mechanics and genre elements in an innovative way. If you start with a great story, instead of trying to trick the audience into believing jump scares and loud noises and CGI are the story, things will get better. Thank you for hanging out again, folks.
Until next time.
It's me, Johnny, from that video you just watched, although I'm sure you know who I am, right? You should subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost anything, it's easy to do, and it makes creative people like myself who thrive on compliments feel all warm and fuzzy. And if you like that last video, click on this next video because it's just as amazing. Click on it.